I've expressed this opinion before, but as I've seen that it is starting to become mainstream, I do need to repeat my opinion. Expedition 33 fans are the kind of people who hate RPGs. This has been the reoccurring thing throughout this hype cycle for the game ever since it came out in April. People have been saying it has a 10 out of 10 story. It's one of the best RPGs ever made. It's going to be game of the year. The same old song and dance we've been getting for every flavor of the month game for the past 25 years. Okay. It reminds me a lot of Cyberpunk or Baldur's Gate 3 or Metaphor Refantasio even, where these people are coming out, they're screaming about how this game has this great moving story and this amazing unique combat system, and it just feels fake. And the way it feels fake is that people who don't play RPGs are coming out and trying to say that this game is as good or better than all-time classics like Chrono Trigger, like Final Fantasy VI, and countless other games. It was a reoccurring thing for this game to hype it up as being like this new 10 out of 10 RPG. And I couldn't help but notice the individuals who were saying this, people like Max Dude, people like Darkside Phil, people like Asmongold, I think. Like, no, not Asmongold. Yeah, he was Moist Critical. I was thinking specifically. These guys, these millennials, like these man children who don't play RPGs, are trying to tell you that for some inexplicable reason that Expedition 33 is better than other RPGs. Like they love to tell you that the combat is completely unique and original when the developers specifically refer to Mario and Luigi as their inspiration. They try and say that the story is good, and the way they talk about it really reminds me of how the industry tried to sell you on The Last of Us when it came out. They tried to tell you it was some like amazing 10 out of 10, like well written, well directed, just amazing story, the best ever told in video games. And the reality is that wasn't true at all, and like people like me were very quick to point that out. At the time, people called The Last of Us the Citizen Kane of video games, and that was a buzzword for a very, very, very long time. It wasn't until like The Last of Us Part 2 came out and people started turning on the Sony exclusives that people started acknowledging that The Last of Us was never very good to begin with, and kind of is the shining example of everything that's been wrong with the gaming industry for the past 25 years. Like all hype, no actual substance. And the way Expedition 33 looks, the same way that Metaphor Refantasio looked, the same way that Baldur's Gate 3 looked, the same way that Elden Ring looked. Like it's all hype and no actual substance. I play random RPGs from the 2000s that are better than Expedition 33. I recently had this experience playing Tales of Vesperia for the first time. Never played it before, went into it with no expectations, and then just came away with this like feeling that this was an amazing RPG that I wish I had grown up with. It's not my new all-time favorite or anything, but I really was moved by the story and the characters and just their development throughout. Tales of Vesperia is awesome. Super underrated RPG. Like, how many Expedition 33 fans have played Tales of Vesperia? How many of them have played Pokemon or Mario and Luigi or even Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger? Like how many of these people regularly play games like Trails or Ys or just Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, SMT, Fire Emblem, Xenoblade. How many of these people are actively playing all of these other RPG franchises? How much street cred did they have? And when you really dig into what they say, what they believe, how they hype up Expedition 33, you come up with you realize very quickly that not only do these guys not play those games, they have nothing but contempt for them. Whenever people try and compare Expedition 33 to those games and acknowledge say how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 had a way better story, or had way more content or way better animations, or you'll see Expedition 33 fans swoop in and try and defend their game and try to hype it up as this all-time masterpiece and this just like untouchable giant in the industry that's totally gonna win Game of the Year, bro. And like I have no doubt in my mind it will, but in the sense that like the Game of the Year awards are rigged and shouldn't be taken seriously by anyone. You know, like with Baldur's Gate 3, you know, they're gonna hand the award over to this while several more deserving Nintendo games are right there doing better and are more critically acclaimed. You know, the Expedition 33 hype, I feel, isn't even going to carry over into next year. Is kind of my mindset. It has that energy about it. You know, if all you can do, like when hyping up your game, is like talk trash about other games and then like turn around and like, you know, constantly gloat about how it's totally going to win Game of the Year, like you're not going to have any momentum. Like nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to pay attention to you. Nobody's going to remember, you know, Expedition 33 the same way they don't really remember It Takes Two or The Last of Us Part 2 or like Ghost of Tsushima or like, you know, any of this other slop that was like hyped up as like a Game of the Year contender. You know, like Expedition 33 is probably going to be freely given the award, you know, not having earned it. And it's going to be instantly forgotten, you know. It's it's just appalling seeing so many people try and do this whole song and dance, like role playing as hardcore RPG fans to try and gaslight you into supporting a developer that couldn't even make it at Ubisoft. You know, it's like, who are you trying to fool? You know, like, and this is kind of my opinion of this is that the industry is really, really desperate to gaslight you into thinking there's all this talent in the Western gaming sphere that's just being held back by corporate interests. It's not true. You know, Western RPGs have never been on the same level of quality as Japanese RPGs. You know, that goes back all the way back in the Ultima days. You know, Dragon Quest very quickly eclipsed it in relevancy and popularity. And ever since, it's been this like never-ending cope from the PC community that they're secretly like all these great like lower budget titles on PC that are just way beyond any of these silly old Japanese RPGs. Like this is like the modern day equivalent of G4 just making their review and like, you know, like being incredibly racist towards Japanese developers. You know, like this is all this is. You know, it's them trying to claim a genre that they've really had no influence on. It's really them trying to act as if they're still producing hardcore games for hardcore gamers when like they never have and never will. Like Expedition 33, I think, is kind of the follow up to Baldur's Gate 3 in this way. And it follows the same template of just hyping up this thing so much that it comes at the detriment of everything else around it. You know, and it's not because the game is good, it's because the industry desperately wants it to succeed. And I haven't played Expedition 33, so I don't know like what their goal is with this. Like with Baldur's Gate, it was to like downplay Nintendo and Zelda and all that to like try and normalize degeneracy. I'm very curious about like what the mindset behind worshiping Baldo Expedition 33 might be. It very well may be just a case of it being like made by a small Western team supposedly and like trying to sell you on the idea that the industry is healing, bro. Like I definitely find it like suspect how many people have tried to shill this game. And it really needs to be like said more in this community. Like, why do all these people back the same game as Game of the Year? Like, why can't they have like their own opinions? Why can't they have their takes? Why can't they be honest with themselves or with other people? Like the fact that they're so adamantly like all in on support of like Expedition 33 is it makes no sense. Like it really doesn't, especially if you're the kind of person that doesn't normally cover RPGs. Like that is the big thing that makes me feel as if this game has to be a giant meme because you know we've seen time and time again whenever Nintendo releases a new Fire Emblem, whenever they release a new Xenoblade, whenever they release like a new anything, you see these people sigh and shake their heads, and suddenly when a knockoff product from a Western developer appears, suddenly they're like soy jacking and saying it's their new favorite thing. Enough, like I've had enough of this. Like this behavior absolutely needs to be called out.